status quo is the enemy.
We must think differently.
Get better, faster.
Companies don't change, innovate, and transform. People do. Welcome to Innovate for the Future. Listen in as Dirk drills down deep with leaders and innovators from within distribution and beyond who are disrupting markets and changing the way business is done. Those who are innovating for the future. Innovating for the future.
It's time to change the rules.
Become the disruptor rather than the disrupted.
We own the future.
Are you ready? You can create your future. You own your future. And your journey of innovating for the future begins now. With your host, Dirk Beveridge.
Hey, welcome back to Innovate for the Future. I am Dirk Beveridge, your host, the author of Innovate, How Successful Distributors Lead Change in Disruptive Times, and the founder of Unleash WD, the only innovation summit for distributors. Our fourth annual is going to be held September 16th and 17th at Venue 610 in Chicago, Illinois, right there on Michigan Avenue. You're not going to want to miss this. We're going to bring in about 15 of the world's greatest thinkers, innovators, and transformers. You see, what we do is we curate our speakers with care to provide a perfect blend of inspiration, how-to models, and lessons of change and innovation. These are the disruptors, the leaders, and the innovators who transform businesses and industries. And as a listener of Innovate for the Future, you know the power of the innovative distributor model. All of these interviews are based on that model, and the summit, Unleash WD, uses that same model, but we interject these brilliant speakers from outside of the industry. So check it all out. You're going to want to be there. It's you can check it all out at www.unleashwd.com. But for now, let's jump into episode 15, our fifth in our five-part series with Joe Nettemeyer, the CEO of Valin Corporation out in San Jose, California. And it's been a phenomenal series. And I got to tell you something. You are going to love the next 30 minutes. You see, because Joe Nettemeyer believes that the very nature of leadership throughout distribution is changing, and it must change. You see, Joe explains that there has been a seduction to easy. Just think about that. A seduction to easy as a result of the long history of growth of our economy, markets, industries, and businesses that we've all experienced over the last decades. It seduced us to easy. You see, in years past, Joe explains that leaders could ride the wave. It wasn't important to lead. It was just important to service what was rolling in the door. Now, as the world and our markets change at this disruptive pace, we must create demand, Joe tells us, not just service demand, and that takes a different thought process, a different way of thinking, and it requires transformative leadership. So in this fifth episode with Joe, as he and I explore the innovative distributor model, Joe shares his views on the need for the transformative leadership in distribution today. And after listening, you'll take away amazing insights to focus your organization on the needed change, just as transformative leaders do. Let's jump in with Joe Nettemeyer. Welcome back to Innovate for the Future. This is episode 15, where I'm meeting with Joe Nettemeyer, the CEO of Valin Corporation out of San Jose, California. Joe, thanks again for visiting.
Well, it's a pleasure to be back, Dirk.
Yeah, Joe, we've had 4 phenomenal conversations as we've looked at the model of the innovative distributor. We've agreed that, and I've learned from you, Joe, in terms of, the need to have a vision, the need to create this culture of change and transformation and innovation, this need to really ask ourselves, what do we stand for, to craft a value proposition that is differentiating and adds value in the marketplace, and then to really rethink our business models. And I think it all leads to the 5th component part of the innovative distributor, and thus our conversation, Joe, and that's transformative leadership. One of the things that I think about, Joe, and I'd love your take on this, is, over the last 4 conversations, you have talked so much about how our world is changing, about how business is changing, and how we as an organization and as leaders have got to drive new thinking in the organization. So, Joe, do you feel like I do that our businesses are calling on leadership more so than ever before, that the world and that our companies, the industry, needs real leadership now, maybe more so than ever before?
Yeah, I totally agree. Not only in our industry, I think we see it in all facets of the American experience. We need it we need national leadership. We need local leadership in the communities. We need leadership in our businesses. And what we've been seduced by, I think, has been a long history of traditional significant growth. And we could just ride the wave, and it wasn't important to lead. It was just important to service what was rolling into the door. But now we have to create demand, not just service demand. And that takes a different thought process and a different way of thinking, and it's really challenging. And a lot of people don't want the challenge. They've gotten seduced by easy. And,
seduced by easy.
But in that is opportunity. For those that are seduced by easy, it makes it easy for us who are not seduced by it to take advantage of the opportunities being presented to us.
You bet. So, Joe, I know for a fact that you are not, have not, will never be seduced by easy, and I know that you wouldn't mention this, but I will. Just several months ago, the San Jose Silicon Valley Chamber of Commerce awarded you a very deserving Businessman of the Year because of the leadership. And Joe, congratulations for that. I mean, in Silicon Valley, for an industrial distributor, if you will, to have its leader, its CEO named Businessman of the Year, it truly is an honor, and congratulations on that. They certainly see leadership in Joe Nettemeyer. I'm just curious, how do you define leadership? If we both agree that the world, the nation, locally, communities need leadership more so than ever before, how do you define leadership? What is leadership in your mind?
I think leaders set standards and don't make excuses for not achieving those standards. I think leaders are people that get things done. And they get the important things done. They're able to prioritize and focus on what is critical for the long-term health of the company. They're not administrators. They typically don't want to spend their time there. And if they're smart, they bring people in that make sure the business functions well in this day-to-day as you're transforming it into the business models that you want. And I think the most important part of leadership is it's not leadership of the day. It's the most important attribute is perseverance, because overcoming the tyranny of the status quo that we've discussed before requires a great deal of perseverance.
Let's talk. I know we've talked about it before, and I'm going to come back to perseverance because it's so important. But you everything you said that leadership is, you said it's not leadership of the day. It's not administration. However, I write about it in our book, Innovate. I write about the fact that I find that so many of us, we get caught in this tyranny of the urgent, right? We get caught into this administering for the day-to-day. Joe, why do you think it is so hard for us in business, for us in distribution, for us, I don't know, for us to escape this tyranny of the urgent?
Well, I think one of the great traps that leaders and companies fall into is when they don't know what to do, they just create more activity. And, you know, it's the old proverbial discussion about, well, let's move the deck chairs around so people think we're doing something. And, you know, let's do more training. Let's have more meetings. Let's have more discussions. Nothing gets decided. Nothing advances, but we check the boxes in all these activities so everybody feels we are doing something to address the situation at hand, and we don't address the situation at hand. And I think a big gap in leadership today is I find a lot of people that they're just dusting off activities of the past and they want to do them again, and it's a waste of time. I look at how much sales effort is expended on trying to peddle commodity products, and I'm saying this is a waste of time. You know, you're wasting the capital given to you by your investors. In the public sector, you've got shareholders, and in a company like this, we're investing the employee's future. So I can choose to focus on activity, or I can choose to focus on change. And I think leaders focus on where we're going rather than busy work.
When leaders focus on where we are going, right, by the very definition of that, because we're not there yet where we're going, it by the very definition, it suggests that we need to change. We need to do something different today than we did yesterday. We need to rethink processes, systems, people, resources. We need to we need to completely, rethink how we do what it is we do. That's not easy to do. I think over the last 4 conversations, you used the word hard, challenging, difficult at least 20 different times, right? That change is hard. Why would somebody why would somebody who has, let's say, 5 years left, I don't know if that's you or not, Joe, but why would somebody who has 5 years left, 6 years left, whatever, before we turn our business over to the next generation, why would we want to go through that hard work? Because my lifestyle's been provided for.
Well, I think it's what is inherent in a good leader takes responsibility for the outcomes. And, I don't want my legacy to be, well, he screwed off the last 5 years. Yeah, my legacy has to be, I want the legacy to be a healthy company that provides people who have a dream the opportunity to realize their dream. And to realize your dreams, you have to challenge and you have to set expectations, and you gotta push people to escape the self-limitations they place on themselves. And if I were to leave and this business were to crumble, then I failed. And I take that responsibility. And And trust me, it's easy to say, I've had enough. At times the burdens get heavy, and the frustrations mount because you're dealing with some of the same people issues over and over and over again, and it becomes it just becomes a worn out record. But you got to persevere past that, and you got to focus on those individuals that are leading the charge, and you got to hold them forth as the examples of success. And but that's tough. It's tough. It's easy to say, hey, it's time for me to prop my feet up and suck in the sunshine. But
which it sounds pretty good, Joe.
Yeah,
right?
It does. But I guess for me it would be boring. I think the real quality of leadership is you got to have an inquisitive mind. You have to have the ability to keep learning. And I'm not ready to close that book on learning. I feel I've got a short period of time as I've entered into the fourth quartile of my life to learn as much as I can. And now it's more about prioritization. But my greatest responsibility to the people that have entrusted me with that responsibility here at Valin is to leave them a healthy opportunity.
Joe, we talked about it in one of our earlier conversations about, the ease it is to be trapped into managing just for today, even financial results and the like, right? And what I think I hear you saying is that leaders not only perform for today, because you talked about it, right? We got to set standards and we don't make excuses for not achieving those. So we must perform for today, but real leadership, if I'm hearing you right, is doing what's necessary to put in place the foundation, to put in place the team, to create a business, to create relevancy and sustainability, not just for this week, this quarter, this year, or even the next couple of years, but to ensure that what we leave behind is sustainable. Can I say for the next generation? Can I say for the next 2 generations? It sounds like that's part of the real driver, if I'm hearing you, Joe, from your perspective in terms of a leader.
Yeah, I think so. And it's also important for me to, as a leader, to make sure that I take high potential individuals and stretch them to see what they're capable of, and more importantly, teach them how to make the tough decision. I think we get compromised organizationally by clinging to yesterday, and unfortunately, sometimes we get people that retire on the job. And as a leader, you got to either get them to unretire or tell them that they are retired. But you've got to get them out of the way of the investment you have to make in progress. And that sounds harsh. But I think expecting someone to continuously try and improve themselves is not an unrealistic expectation. And in today's world, it's a necessity. And I see people that are still trying to play life at 55 years of age plus with 25-year-old skills. And the skills of a 25-year-old today are a lot better than their skills. And they just want to cling to, make it easy for me. And life's not easy, life's a struggle. You can either make it a a struggle that let a struggle destroy you, or you can make it a healthy struggle of personal growth and personal achievement. Leadership does that.
You mentioned earlier, Joe, about the self-limitation people put on themselves. Is that what you see more often than not? It's self-limitations. And if so, what causes that? I mean, everybody sees the world changing, right? So, I'm trying to think through this self-limitation that people put on themselves. I don't even know if I got a good question, Joe, honestly there, but the term strikes me.
Well, our ego gets in the way. And our ego becomes self-limiting because we don't.
So, are you ready to change the rules? Join Dirk and hundreds of your peers who are innovating for the future at the must-attend event for distributors, Unleash WD Innovation Summit. Unleash WD is the only innovation summit for distributors and held each fall in Chicago. For all the details, the dates, agenda, speakers, and more, visit unleashwd.com.
Our ego gets in the way. And our ego becomes self-limiting because we don't want to admit that we don't know something. There's a gentleman who's written a book called Simplify Everything. His name is Steve Epner. And one of the questions he encourages leaders to ask of the people around them is, what's the dumbest thing you've seen them do in the last month or 6 months? A lot of people don't want to ask that question and a lot of people are afraid to answer that question, which speaks to culture. But if you ask that question, you're opening yourself up to criticism. Now, that can be constructive criticism where you say, that really is dumb. Or it can be criticism that destroys the morale of the organization when your ego kicks in and you are defending the status quo even though it's inefficient and unimaginative. So, getting past that, hey, I don't have to be an expert on everything, and getting into a collective learning experience is a real surrendering of the ego, and that's the limiting factor. That's the self-limitation. I don't want to admit that I don't know everything. The older I get, the more I realize how little I know, and a leader has to get people past that, and that's hard. It's difficult, and the demands you place on people sometimes wear it out. That's why some people can only make it in leadership positions for a limited period of time. The things they had to do were so painful that someone else has to come in, but you have to take on the struggle. You just can't avoid the struggle.
So, which I think, to me, that my interpretation is that's a second limiting factor in terms that we place on ourselves, right? The first you talked about is this ego getting in the way. And then the second in my mind as I'm listening to you, Joe, is the struggle, right? That some are willing to go through the hard work of growth. Some are willing to conjure up the energy to do what's necessary in difficult time, in new times, and there's some that embrace that healthy struggle that you talk about, and others might not. Is that fair? Might that be a second limiting factor that we place on ourselves?
Oh, absolutely. I think the really talented people that I've met in life are in a perpetual quest of personal development. And you can't can't rest on your laurels. You know, it's the people that I think are very successful at leading are very successful in their professional and personal lives are those that say, hey, there's more to be learned. I can play at a higher level. And they spend the time doing the research and reading and listening and shaping a more holistic perspective on what it is they have to accomplish. None of us have the market cornered on great ideas. We just got to open up our ears, and there are great ideas all around us. But we all too often get caught up into, I got to figure it out myself. And that becomes a limitation.
Yeah. Joe, with all the access to the world's information, right? It's at our fingertips. It's on our iPhone. It's on our laptop. The world's information is there for us, and there's so much to learn. I mean, I know you fall asleep at night reading your books in your chair. How do you prioritize? You know, how do you filter what is important to learn? What book you're going to pick up? Because it's endless. My nightstand next to my bed has books that are piled up, right? And I'll never get to everything that I want to read, everything that I want to learn. How do you go through in your role responsible for, creating that business that's prepared for the future? How do you go ahead and prioritize what to read, what to consume, what to study, what learning path you're on?
I go into every year identifying what I believe is the most important thing that I have to do for the organization in that year. Then I focus my learning experiences on giving me, the maximum amount of information on that particular thing. I think you gotta have a danger. You try to read everything and there's just too many things. You gotta bring focus to what you want to learn. You gotta take what you learn and apply it immediately, or your retention goes away. And I think it's about everything you do in life. It's narrow it down to a focus. And once you get that, there's other things you can fill in on. But, I try to plan 18 months ahead. By the end of June, I've established our priorities for 2015, and that's well on its way now. By the end of June, we will have a review of what our priorities in 2016 are going to be. And we will be discussing those with the management team in July. And I'm going to focus on those priorities, on filling the gaps of knowledge I need to help shepherd us through those priorities. And that'll identify where we have knowledge gaps in our management team, and they get prioritized for them learning experience. So it's you got to be looking ahead all the time and not wait to try to react in the moment. If you react in the moment, it's tough.
Yeah, I'm going all the way back to our first conversation on the importance of vision and peering into the future. And, what I'm hearing you say is, your ability as a leader to, look into the future, identify those inflection points, identify where we need to pivot the business, the next business model that we're going to be iterating around. You develop those types of priorities. And again, by definition, because we don't yet have those capabilities, it suggests that even as the leader, even as the CEO, you know you've got to head in a direction, but you might not have all the answers. You don't have all the answers. There's still more to learn, and it's that peering into the future, if I'm hearing you, really is driving that learning journey that you're on, saying, I sense I need to get there. I sense I know I need to change the business model of the model of our sales organization. And I know it's going to incorporate thought leadership more so than, the traditional I like you, you like me type sales. Now, how we're going to accomplish that, I'm not sure. I need to learn that. I know that's where I'm going. So that's what I'm going to fall asleep in my chair at night learning about, where I want to take the organization. Is that right, Joe?
Yeah, then you augment it by seeking out experts in those fields of endeavor and developing an exchange with them, whether it's consulting service or interacting. It's one of the great benefits of being on the NAW board for the Institute of Distribution Excellence. I get to meet a lot of very first-rate minds, and what they do is, when I listen, they complete the picture for me. And I get these aha moments, I'll be wrestling with an issue, and you got to recognize that you're not the only person in the world wrestling with that issue. So if you can get a lot of first-rate minds together, you're going to get some breakthroughs in thought.
Without question, Joe. And I know that's what you're doing at Valin, right? You're surrounding yourself with those first-rate minds. Even your hiring and your recruiting process is all designed to bring in those first-rate minds, and then continuing their learning journey with the investment you make in their development. And I know, that's something that you and I, as we curate our Unleash WD Innovation Summit, that's what we want to do. We want to bring first-rate minds into this industry to inject new thinking so that we can have those aha moments that you talk about to really help us rethink our business and continue to look to innovate it as the Innovative Distributor does to create that relevant and sustainable business. Joe, this has just been a phenomenal 5 conversations with you. I appreciate not only what you continue to help me learn, to help me grow, but I appreciate the friendship and your willingness to devote the time to have these conversations and to share, to help the industry and all of our listeners get better. Joe, it's been an amazing conversation. I appreciate it, and I wish you well, man. We'll talk soon.
Well, Dirk, I appreciate that, and I'll leave you with one last thought. To use an analogy of the progress that a baseball player must get through to get to the major leagues, when I look at the wholesale distribution industry, I think looking back in retrospect, we could be successful playing at the AA or even the AAA level for the last 50 years. But now we have to break through to the major league level if we want to go forward. And that's tough, because the difference between AAA and Major League is 10%. The last 10% gain is the toughest mile. So that's what we're in the midst of, and leadership has to recognize that and not rest on its laurels, but say, how do we get to the Major League?
Boy, I love it, Joe. And if you don't mind, let me just piggyback on that. All the talk in our industry about Amazon, right? And how Amazon, came out 18 months ago with Amazon Supply and realized that business model wasn't the right model. So they closed it down and they've incorporated it into Amazon Business, right? And truth be told, I don't know what the next iteration of that business model is going to be. But using your analogy of, we could be all right playing AA or AAA, but now we've got to be looking to the major league. I believe, Joe, that just take Amazon as one example. To me, I think every leader in this industry should look at Amazon as the major league, right? And I don't know what their business model is going to be. I don't know if they're going to be able to compete directly against you, Joe, with the way you're adding value. But I think we could use them as leaders as a rallying cry, because they are the major leagues. In my mind, we find ourselves now in an environment where we're competing against the boldest guys on the planet. We're competing now in one form or fashion or another. We're competing against the smartest guys on the planet. We're competing against the most customer-centric guys on the planet. And we can go down, and knowing that we've moved from AA to AAA, right, to major league, if that's not a call for leadership, how we started off this conversation, I don't know what is. And so I love the analogy, AA to AAA to major league. And I think Amazon is just one example that we can say, you know what? That 10% is coming into our market pretty quickly. Let's use it as a catalyst to drive everything we've been talking about, Joe, in terms of the need for vision, culture, value proposition, business model innovation, and certainly what we just talked about, the need for transformative leadership.
See, leadership's not about how you're going to react to Amazon. Leadership is about how you're going to beat Amazon.
You bet. And let's leave it at that, because we could have, and I want to have this industry to talk about that and come up with those solutions about beating Amazon and others. So, Joe, it's been amazing. Thank you so much. And we will talk soon, my friend. Thank you.
I've enjoyed the conversations, and thanks for including me in this program.
Thank you, Joe.